Letting her walk away is the moment you quietly show her the things she couldn't see while she was inside your life. You don't raise your voice. You don't chase. You don't perform. You simply stop giving energy to someone who thought your presence was guaranteed. That stillness hits harder than any speech you could give. Because silence carries a truth most people never see until it's too late. A man who isn't afraid to lose her is a man she can never fully control. And she feels that shift instantly. Your calm isn't passive. It's a message. A clean, unspoken line. I wanted you, not needed you. That difference separates boys from men. A boy negotiates for affection. A man withdraws when the connection turns into chaos. You're not proving anything. You're protecting yourself. And that protection is a power she didn't expect. She anticipated resistance. She anticipated emotion. She expected you to cling. When you don't, her brain scrambles for an explanation. Women are used to reactions, not restraint. When a man remains steady while she pulls away, her mind has to work. It has to interpret what you're not saying. It has to fill in the blanks. And those blanks are loud. You're not cold. You're composed. You're not punishing. You're prioritizing. You're not disappearing. You're stepping out of a space where your effort was mismatched. That clarity is rare. And rare things get recognized, just never immediately. Most men panic when they feel distance. They overthink. They text more. They become emotional beggars without realizing it. You do the opposite. You slow down. You breathe. You let the moment pass without reaching for reassurance from someone who stopped offering it. That composure isn't just attractive, it's unsettling. It forces her to see that you're not tied to the outcome. You're tied to your standard. You don't argue. You don't defend yourself. You let her believe whatever she needs to believe, because your value doesn't depend on her understanding. She'll understand later. She always does. Clarity grows in the empty spaces, the ones you create by stepping back. Your silence isn't a game. It's a boundary. A reminder that you will not compete for a place in someone's life when you once offered a home. And as she walks away, she expects the world to feel lighter. Instead, the world feels bigger, colder, and strangely unfamiliar without your consistency grounding it. She thought leaving would put her in control. Instead, your calm hands the control back to you. And the truth settles in quietly. The man who can let her go without falling apart is the man she will remember long after the noise fades. She smiles louder than she feels. She posts pictures with captions that pretend everything is simple. She tells friends she's thriving. But inside, there's a hollowness that surprises her. She expected relief. Instead, she finds a quiet ache she can't name. The first reaction to loss is denial dressed in bravado. That denial feels savvy at first, a shield against shame. But it doesn't hold. Confusion creeps in like a slow leak. Small things fracture her certainty. A memory plays without the noise of excuses attached. A shared joke repeats in her head with a new, sharper edge. She thought leaving would free her from the weight of connection. Instead, she confronts the weight of absence. Absence reframes details she overlooked. Choices she celebrated begin to look impulsive. Comfort she dismissed now reads like shelter. She rehearses explanations that don't fit. She tells herself stories about independence and growth. Those stories sound powerful until she recognizes them as edits, not truth. The mind resists the possibility that a decision was a mistake. So it manufactures reasons, rewrites context, borrows confidence from strangers. Conversation replaces introspection. Social noise becomes anesthetic. But later, when the screen goes dark, the silence forces a reckoning. Curiosity arrives masked as casual interest. She glances at old texts and rewatches clips. Those small acts are not harmless. They are searchlights. She compares the men who came after with the ones she left and finds the comparison unsatisfying. New faces feel flashy, like temporary thrills that evaporate with sunrise. The contrast sharpens into doubt. Does she prefer chaos to steadiness? Did she trade depth for distraction? Questions that once felt irrelevant now demand answers. What unsettles her most is not loss of affection. It's loss of identity shaped by your presence. She realizes she had adapted to your steady patterns. Her rhythms sync to your steadiness without noticing. Without that rhythm, she feels offbeat. Her choices no longer align with the person she remembers being around you. That misalignment breeds second thoughts. She begins to track the ways her life feels less coherent. Pride fights humility. She wants to own her decision. She clings to narratives of autonomy. But guilt and astonishment pull from the other side. Both forces coexist. That internal tug-of-war leaves her exhausted. She faces a rare honesty, leaving simplified the short-term and complicated the long-term. Escape became an experiment. The experiment now reveals unexpected consequences. Time then becomes an amplifier. Small regrets expand into larger realizations. Clarity arrives through repetition. She notices patterns in new relationships that mirror old problems. The novelty fades and leaves a steady comparison. Confusion loosens into acceptance of a hard truth. She traded a different kind of wealth, emotional steadiness, for temporary excitement. That admission opens the door to the next stage. Curiosity grows teeth and recognition follows. That slow dawning unsettles her but also forces real change and honest reflection today. Curiosity always starts quietly. A small pull. A quick glance at something she swore she wouldn't touch again. It feels harmless, almost accidental. But nothing is accidental when emotions haven't finished speaking. She checks your profile without meaning to. She slows down on a picture she pretended to forget. She rereads a message she once ignored. These tiny acts don't look like much, but they mark the beginning of a shift she can't hide from herself. She expected you to collapse. Instead, she sees you steady, calm, centered. That unsettles her more than any argument could. A man who doesn't fall apart becomes someone she has to rethink. And that rethinking creates friction inside her. She wonders how you're handling the distance so well. She wonders why you look lighter. She wonders what changed in you, or if something was always there that she didn't recognize. Curiosity then evolves. It's no longer a peek, it's a pattern. She checks again. She notices details. Your tone online feels different. Your posture looks clearer. Your life seems fuller without her. That realization lands heavy because it challenges her self-image. She once believed she was the emotional center in your world. Now she sees she may have overestimated her influence. That bruise to the ego becomes the spark that pushes her deeper into investigation. She starts comparing. Not just you to others, but you to the version of herself around you. The men she entertains after you feel loud, rushed, inflated. They speak in compliments instead of presence. They demand attention instead of earning respect. When she contrasts that with how she felt around your quiet certainty, it stings. She didn't appreciate the stability when it was offered freely. Now she feels the absence like a missing limb. Your silence creates a puzzle she can't solve quickly. And the mind hates unsolved puzzles. She begins filling in blanks with her own imagination. That imagination becomes dangerous because it exaggerates your value in her memory. She remembers the calm you brought into chaos. She remembers the way you listen without judgment. She remembers the steadiness she once mislabeled as boring, now she calls it rare. Curiosity becomes a cycle. She thinks about reaching out but hesitates. She hovers over your name then withdraws. That hesitation tells her something she didn't want to admit. She's losing the illusion of control. Every time she checks on you, she realizes you're not waiting. You're moving. You're adapting. You're becoming sharper from the silence. This slow build of interest turns into emotional pressure. The more she watches without touching, the more she wants clarity. The more she remembers without speaking, the more she feels the weight of her choices. Curiosity then shifts into something heavier, a quiet discomfort that whispers the truth she avoided. You were not ordinary, and she walked away from something she didn't fully understand. The past doesn't arrive as a scream. It comes as a weight that settles on ordinary moments. A song on the radio turns sharp. A smell in a street brings a picture into focus. Tiny, harmless things become loaded with meaning. They pile up until she cannot ignore them. Memory begins to rearrange the present around what used to feel steady. She finds herself pausing in the middle of a laugh, struck by how his voice used to steady her. The things she dismissed as ordinary become anchors in her mind. Small gestures, an exact look, a patient question, the way arguments ended without ruin, start to feel like priceless habits she took for granted. Those habits were scaffolding. Without them, her life starts to wobble. Guilt isn't theatrical. It rings like a bell in quiet rooms. She sits with it alone and feels its weight. The realization that she traded depth for a thrill slides under her pride and stays. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It grows in the dark, a slow erosion of the confident story she once told herself. That erosion opens up all the places she patched over with convenience. Regret is less about missing him and more about missing who she became with him. She notices she no longer moves through days the same way. Her choices seem less sure. The confidence she wore around him felt like armor, but soft, not heavy. Now she notices how often she appealed to that armor, how often she relied on another person to make the messy parts tolerable. Loss exposes dependence in ways excuses cannot hide. Memory sharpens details that reality blurred. She recalls how arguments ended not with resentment but with understanding. She remembers being heard instead of answered. She feels again the steadiness that made chaos tolerable. Those recollections are not sentimental fluff. They are practical proofs of a life ordered by another man's consistency. That evidence accumulates until comparison is unavoidable. Comparisons cut deeper than she expected. New partners bring noise and flash, but they offer little that lasts. The novelty fades fast. In its place arrives the quiet standard he set, stability, not spectacle. Every lack stands out. Their inconsistencies become glaring. Where once she valued immediate excitement, she now notices the hollowness it left behind. The contrast exposes loss as a pattern, not an accident. That realization forces hard questions. Did she leave a safe harbor for something that promised storms? Was the thrill worth the collapse she is now rebuilding from? Those questions are not rhetorical. They demand answers, and those answers require honesty she once avoided. Facing them is a strange kind of humility, slow, awkward, necessary. Memory also breeds a strange tenderness toward what was steady. She feels softened by the recollection of being held through small crises, of having a partner whose presence steadied her tremors. That tenderness is not weakness. It is an acknowledgement that certain kinds of care are rare and expensive to replace. It lodges in her like a quiet ache and becomes the engine for change. In the end, memory doesn't beg for restoration. It simply clarifies which parts of life were real and which were temporary. That clarity neither ruins nor redeems by itself. It nudges her toward accountability, toward learning the difference between the comfort she abandoned and the chaos she chased. The weight of those memories becomes a teacher, harsh and honest, and it will not be ignored. Accountability doesn't show up with drama. It arrives like a slow tightening in the chest. A pressure she can't shake. She starts replaying choices she once defended with conviction. Those choices now feel flimsy. They don't hold up against the version of herself she becomes in silence. The distance exposes everything she glossed over. Every moment she dismissed as nothing suddenly feels sharper, heavier, more revealing. She begins to see how you carried more weight than she acknowledged. The small ways you steadied situations. The way you held emotional ground without turning it into a performance. The way your restraint protected both of you from unnecessary chaos. These qualities were invisible while you were present. Now they stand out like bright signs she ignored. Her pride takes a hit. She realizes she misread your calm as indifference. She misread your boundaries as coldness. She misread your silence as distance when it was actually emotional discipline. These misunderstandings weren't malicious, they were immature. And that immaturity catches up with her. It forces her to look inward rather than sideways. She notices patterns she created subconsciously. How she pushed to test your patience. How she pulled back to see if you'd chase. How she used emotion to control outcomes instead of communicating clearly. Those patterns were games she played without considering the cost. Now she sees the cost in full. She sees the toll it took on the connection. She sees the pressure it put on your shoulders. She sees the moments where you showed up despite her withdrawal. That recognition stings. Accountability always stings. It strips away the narrative that kept her comfortable. She can't blame timing, stress, or circumstance anymore. She sees her own fingerprints on the downfall. That clarity is uncomfortable but necessary. Growth never begins with ease. It begins with the acceptance that she wasn't as careful with a good man as she should have been. She doesn't confess this out loud. She sits with it privately, letting it reshape her perspective. She starts assessing her reactions differently. She revisits old arguments in her mind and realizes how often you were the stabilizing force. How often you softened what she sharpened. How often you chose patience over pride. These realizations don't inflate you in her mind, they humble her in her own. She wonders why she didn't recognize your value until she stood outside your life. That question haunts her because the answer is simple. She thought you'd always be there. She assumed your presence was permanent. Now she sees the flaw in that assumption. A good man doesn't stay through disrespect. A disciplined man doesn't tolerate emotional carelessness. A grounded man walks away when peace is threatened. Accountability then shifts into responsibility. Not for you, she knows she can't rewrite what's done. But for herself. She starts adjusting how she moves. She becomes more aware of the weight of her actions. She realizes that losing a man who brings stability is not a minor loss. It's a long-term consequence. That realization changes her. Quietly. Slowly. Permanently. And the truth she once avoided becomes undeniable. She didn't lose you because you failed. She lost you because you finally stopped absorbing the chaos she refused to control. When she edges back into your life, it won't arrive like a storm. It will come thin and tested, a hesitant knock disguised as a casual message. She'll practice casualness because vulnerability scares her now. She'll try to measure your reaction before she reveals the shape of her regret. Expect subtleness. A like on a post. A reaction to a story. A question that looks harmless but carries weight. These small moves are probes to check if the ground still holds. She watches how you answer, how quickly you respond, whether your tone gives space or springs to rescue. This moment is not about saving her. Your life now has borders where it used to be an open field. Those borders protect what you value. They test intention. They are filters for worth, not walls against return. Don't confuse gentleness with weakness. You can be warm without being available on demand. You can listen without losing standards. Calm does not mean you accept every apology as proof of change. Words weigh less than repeated deeds. Be curious and guarded at once. Curiosity lets you learn who she is now. Guardedness keeps you from mistaking intention for comfort. One opens the door slightly. The other keeps the threshold intact. Ask for clarity in small proofs. Request alignment before you reinvest. Try short interactions that reveal pattern. A planned call, a kept commitment, consistent follow-through. Show up for the low-stakes tests and watch if she meets them reliably. Your peace is the currency for every decision. If her presence corrodes that calm, do not reintroduce her. If she brings steady repair and accountability, consider gradual trust. Growth is slow and obvious over time. Nostalgia can feel urgent. Wisdom is practical. You can honor what you had without dissolving into needing it back. Welcome her cautiously. Preserve the boundaries that taught her your value. If you rebuild, lead with standards. Make respect and responsibility clear. Demand predictability over promises. Little consistent actions matter more than grand apologies. If you close the door, do it cleanly and without spectacle. Say what you mean. Protect your peace. Either path should reflect the man who could let go, calm, clear, uncompromising about his worth. Watch for patterns that last. Real repair appears in habits, kept plans, clearer messages, calmer conflict, and private accountability. Avoid public displays designed for optics. Improvement shows when stress comes and she chooses responsibility over drama. See how she seeks support. Does she lean on people or on patterns that hurt others? Mature responses respect partnership and own mistakes. Keep your life full. Maintain your routines, friendships, and projects. Don't rebuild your world around the hope of a reunion. That steadiness teaches her value must be earned. It also prevents you from reverting to old, compromising versions of yourself. Remember, admission is your choice. Grant it when actions match words. Let peace decide.